Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Brock Falconer, who's the Regional Director of Sales for dibrokerWest. Brock, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate the opportunity here.
You are welcome. So give us a little bit of your background, what got you into the financial services industry, and then we'll talk about what dibrokerWest does.
Absolutely. Well, I think I can speak for a probably large percentage of people in the industry that I'm in that I'm not legacy, so I kind of fell into this scenario of being in insurance. I myself, once I learned about disability insurance and what this does for people, and we'll obviously get into some of the details, I just couldn't unlearn what I had found out, as well as the fact that, you know, I wanted to make sure that I was helping people in some way, shape, or form, which I think is what a lot of us try to do in our professions. And I just feel like this is such an underserved market. I couldn't let it go once I picked it up in 2007, and I've been going strong ever since. This is my third company that I've worked for in this specific industry, and just really happy about the things we're able to do for folks and really produce a lot of good results in this market space.
Yeah, I think anytime you can hear, you know, like, boy, this really resonated with me, or I've got a story behind, or this really is, you know, rather than I sell number 2 pencils, do you want blue or black? You know, it's just like, you know, being able to really sink your teeth into something is really important. So that's awesome when you can hear that, because then you can just hear the passion that comes through. What so for instance, when you were, you know, when that light bulb went off, what was it about disability insurance and that industry that really caught your attention?
Absolutely. Well, I do have some personal stories of individuals that, one that had some income protection and had an ability to have some, if not a majority of their paycheck replaced when they're unable to work. And, you know, I had some individuals that did not have it. And it's just, it's frightening to see the difference between the two. And to be perfectly honest with you, if I was involved in this industry before these things happened, they would have been even more heavily covered and able to really get by without much financial burden. And secondarily, I guess it was just my own lack of knowledge about this industry, and that's why I love platforms like this. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to just get the word out. I mean, how many TV commercials have you seen about disability insurance? You know, I think most recently there was one during the Super Bowl, and that's the first one I've seen in 10 plus years, versus a lot of the other industries that, you know, seem to be pelted with a lot of advertising and social media and obviously television and whatnot.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about why individual disability is so important, and probably what I would say is why does it seem like people shy away from it even more so than just regular life insurance? Because I think that people go, well, life insurance, that's if I die, I get a benefit. So they tend to put that off. Well, disability insurance would affect you before you die because it's impacting your income. So you would assume that would be even more of a need than, you know, life insurance. So where's that disconnect coming up?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And that's really what, you know, people in my industry, including myself, seem to be butting our head up against on a constant basis. Here's the first issue. Every single permanent life insurance policy will pay out, right? Because we can never get vampires through underwriting. So, you know, that's an obvious. You know, I know I'm going to go. I know that I, you know, potentially might even go earlier than I expected, in which case I'm going to be leaving people behind with a burden. But what they're not thinking about is the what if. You know, the death, the life insurance, that's a win. But with disability, it's a what if, because there's no guarantee it's going to happen. Now, granted, there's a 1 out of 4 chance. And this isn't my stats. This is industry standard stats that someone's going to suffer disabling event during their working years, which, by the way, is 6 times more likely than dying prematurely. But I think that, again, the issue is there's no guarantee, right? So we're insuring something that is kind of conceptual and, you know, cloudy and murky, if you will, even, as well as the fact that I think most people connotate the idea of disability insurance or a disability being in relation to an accident or injury, because it seems like when there's medical conditions like cancer, stroke, heart attack, you know, things like that, people think of that as more of a life event than something that is a disability. Oftentimes it's not going to involve a wheelchair or any kind of specialized van or things like that. But again, everyone knows someone that's gotten an illness and it's negatively affected their life. But for some reason, there's a disconnect between disability insurance and the idea of that being a disability, which of course it is, right? We're talking about.
So what are some? Yeah, I think that's a really great point. You would think that disability is this life event and this catastrophic thing. What are some examples of a trigger that would trigger disability, but yet not be some big, huge accident kind of a thing? What are some of those examples that maybe people can go, oh, yeah, that's a good point?
Well, one thing I think that really raises people's eyebrows is one of the leading causes of disability claims today is mental nervous conditions. So anxiety, depression, work stress. So you think about maybe a nasty divorce or maybe a death in the family, death of a child. I mean, that stuff is going to be catastrophic to someone's mental state. And, I certainly don't want them driving a bus or building my home or, maybe even handling my taxes when they have this traumatic thing going on in their life, and nor should they when they're dealing with something. So again, we're not talking about things that necessarily have to be permanent. The average length of claim in the industry, believe it or not, is 2.7 years.
Okay.
But again, I'll go with the old Jack Candy joke. If I had a choice between two heavens, one that for 2.7 years I had my paycheck replaced and one that for 2.7 years I did not, I know which heaven I would choose. So it's really just about putting yourself through that mental state of, man, if I don't have the ability to work tomorrow, next week, next year, where is my income going to be coming from? And one thing that unfortunately is kind of a drastic hope is that, the government's there for us with Social Security. But as I think many of us know, the chance to qualify for Social Security disability is very, very low. And, this is really the only true way to make sure you're replacing that paycheck, which we often call the cash machine in your basement or the money tree in your backyard, which I think if presented that way, most people would probably choose that as one of the first, if not the first thing they insure.
Yeah, that's, this is new to me, so this is interesting for me to learn some of these points that you're making, which is, you think in your mind, disability, big, huge life event, and you're disabled the rest of your life. Well, that might be the case, but also it might be the case of that 2.7 years. It's like, oh, you just might not be able to work for this reason or that reason for a couple years. Oh, yeah, now that makes, and then some of these other life events, like, these days, even before the COVID, period of time, anxiety and stress and those kinds of things, that's a thing. That's a big need in our society. And I think that, just life events and world events that layer on make people realize, what, there kind of are days where I think, not just I'm lazy, I don't want to go to work, but things like I can't go to work because of this. So, I mean, those are some really great points that you're bringing up to paint that picture.
Absolutely. And I think to curtail even further, keep in mind that with medical advances, people are living longer, right? But it doesn't necessarily guarantee that your way of life and your ability to earn an income and how you're able to live your life is necessarily better. You're just still around. For instance, the rates of people actually dying from cancers have gone down dramatically, but you have to know that people are going through multiple segments of treatment. How are they able to work during those periods of time? Even if they're only able to work part-time, the work isn't going to be able to pay them for full-time work, right? So, these policies also have an ability to have your income replaced on a partial basis, which is another point that people don't often think about. If you sit in a chair 8 hours a day and you have an issue with your back and you just cannot medically do it for more than 3 or 4 hours a day, you're going to have a loss of income because of that, because now you're working part-time.
Yeah,
again,
maybe not full loss, but
scenarios like
partial.
that as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, you bring up an interesting wording, like people insure their life with the life insurance. If you pass, then, this kicks in. Well, insuring your income and maybe partial income loss or temporary income loss. It's not disability for the rest of your life, and it's not full disability. Some of those things can happen, but some of the things that people don't typically think about is, what about a short period of time where you have to go on disability and maybe you could work a little but not full time? Those are some great light bulb moments there that you bring up, insuring the income.
Absolutely. And, here's one of those, fun insurance sayings, but oftentimes they'll call disabling event a living death. because it's the exact same scenario as dying prematurely with the income loss and everything else, except you're now a spectator and a participant in it, and you're there also to help try to pick the pieces up after you recover. Because, again, most people are not permanently disabled, but again, it's the exact same effect. That's why oftentimes life insurance is described as income protection, which is actually supposed to be more attached to the disability insurance realm, but it's the same idea. But again, you're a participant, same effect, same outcome.
Yeah. Huge point. So we've been talking about individual. I would suspect that if you are a business owner, that the same factors apply, but now maybe from my perspective looking in, maybe there's another layer of need where it's like, okay, I'm a business owner and all of these things are, unique moments that I hadn't thought of. But now if something happens to me, it's not just my family that I'm protecting, it's my 2, 4, 10, 20, 30 employees or more. And now that has a huge ripple effect, right?
100%. And, one thing I think we need to get in the mind of a business owner when having these types of conversation is, why did you start a business? Why are you reading the first 200 pages of every year's tax law? Because, you're fighting an uphill battle, but you're doing it for a reason. Oftentimes it's going to be succession planning. It's going to be retirement, whatever that may be. And you just wanted to be self-employed, but you have risks and concerns that far exceed the normal W-2 employee. You mentioned the employees that work for you. Obviously, that's a huge piece of it. You as well in your business, this baby that you grew from infancy, oftentimes is going to be left unprotected. A great example would be individuals that are in partnership. They'll oftentimes draw up a buy-sell agreement. They'll fund it with life insurance, knowing that if one of the owners passes away early, the shares are going to be purchased, but the money provided by that life insurance policy. But oftentimes these buy-sell agreements, they have disability insurance language as well that also speaks to a monetary purchase of these stocks and this ownership, but there's no funding for that. So we're oftentimes finding that and going back and funding that with a disability insurance policy, not to mention covering fixed overhead expenses when a business owner becomes disabled, making sure the lights stay on and the business can churn and burn. We're providing supplemental insurance to their employees because oftentimes that group insurance, while provided by the employer and a fantastic opportunity, is not going to cover a large majority of that individual's income because it's a taxable benefit. Does not cover bonuses and other ancillary incomes for the employee either, as well as there's going to be some key individuals that are huge revenue drivers for a business. We cover those kind of folks with what we call a key person disability insurance policy. So there's some revenue protection when one of these key revenue drivers goes down. And ultimately, our goal is to make sure the path of that business owner, as well as obviously a W-2 employee, but more intricately, that business owner, the path they're on, we can help them stay on that path no matter what happens to them in the future. And, again, unfortunately, this stuff tends to resonate more often after the accident or injury or illness has already happened, and obviously that's too late.
That's not the time. Yeah, you bring up a great point. It's the same scenario of, the key man insurance. You think about, let's protect this partner, and if they pass away, then we need to protect the business. Well, what about the living death example that you gave? What if there's a temporary or partial disability, which impacts their work performance, which impacts the business that you guys are partners in? So you might need to have that key person insurance for the life side, but as well as the income protection side with the disability. Huge piece that I think that a lot of people, again, just, there's that disconnect. They just think, oh, it's just one more thing I've got to worry about and think about but you don't think it'll happen until it actually happens. And that's the point that you're trying to help give that peace of mind for.
Absolutely. And kind of a plug for dibrokerWest here. And, we're not the only ones doing it in the industry here, but we're very proud about the accomplishments we've had and what we're trying to build here. 30 plus years doing it. Our goal is to be a one-stop shop for all these things, right? We've kind of glossed over a bunch of different scenarios, and anyone not quite as familiar with this market obviously could have a little bit of deer in headlights right now. But the centralized idea here is we are the go-between, right? We have contracts with all the major players in the industry, and it's our job to be a partner for individuals in this space that would have the potential to talk to their clients about this. And that's really what our goal is, right? To simplify the unsimple. to make easy what can be very difficult if you're going out and doing it yourself. And, again, with our ability to just transgress all these different things in the industry and just make sure that we're providing all the possible risk protection there is for anyone and their clients, I think is a huge benefit because, again, you can imagine this being an ancillary thing that you have the ability to sell where your focus is either the life insurance or investments or maybe the health insurance. Having a partner like us is extremely important because, how much bandwidth do you really have to learn a completely different market as well as to, get contracts and work directly with all these different carriers and companies and knowing all these products and where the kind of landmines are out in the field. That's really what our goal is, and that's what we focus on.
Yeah, that's a big piece is, stay in your lane, know what you know, spend, like Malcolm Gladwell says in his book, Outliers, but the 10,000 hours, get your 10,000 hours of expertise in the lane that you love. But if you recognize, personal business, disability income protection is a need, bring someone in that can do all of the studying and the industry shifts and trends and figure it all out and be that one-stop shop. I think that's a huge piece that you provide to your producers. So I love that concept, and it lets people continue to do what they love to do. Just like I really wouldn't want to, if I had a huge medical need, I wouldn't want to go to that general practitioner. I'd want to go to the one that specializes in the need that I have, because then that they're studying all the ins and outs and nuances.
Right. Yeah, I'm not going to my general practitioner to do an ACL replacement. That's for sure.
Right.
And I think another piece to it too is, once an app's in, we're the ones fighting for you and the client, right? We're not leaving it all to you, as well as, we're pointing out, hey, this isn't the offer that we wanted. We're going to take it to another carrier, and we're going to find a better offer for you. We're the ones fighting for this to get done for the producer and client. And, I think that's a huge piece as well, because that can be quite cumbersome, as well as, let's face it, you're going to have some leverage when you're constantly doing business with the carrier versus, coming off the street and saying, hey, I want to start doing this now. So I think maybe that the part that's misunderstood about the brokerage industry as well is that it can potentially affect a producer's compensation, and that's just not the case. Everything that we're being accredited for is coming direct from the carriers and the companies versus any effect on the producer. So really, it's just ease of operation for the producer, connectivity to something they weren't connected to before, and someone that's going to fight the battles for them as well.
I love it. Well, Brock, it's been a real pleasure talking with you, learning about this, vital industry. If someone is interested in learning more about personal or business disability insurance or the way that you support your producers, what's the best way they can reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, I think probably the best place would be to go to our website, dibrokerWest.com. It's dibrokerWest.com, and that's your one-stop connectivity to not only information on disability insurance, but also an ability to connect with an individual like myself. And Mike, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to get this out there. Again, I think this is one of, if not the most underserved insurance markets there is. And, the more word we can get out and the more partnerships to get this out into society, the better off we all are. And really looking forward to seeing and hearing more about what you're doing with professionals on your podcast.
Love it. Well, thank you, Brock. I appreciate your time as well.
Okay, thank you.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.